You were never disconnected, you were just never taught how to listen. From the moment you were born, your senses were subtly hijacked. Your mind was gently sculpted to believe that reality halts at the tangible, what can be touched, measured, or seen under a microscope. Anything hinting at the intangible was dismissed as fanciful. You were encouraged to seek external validation, qualifications, mentors, figures of authority, while the genuine wellspring of wisdom lay dormant within you, quietly awaiting acknowledgement. There exists a frequency, predating recorded history and more articulate than any language, that speaks directly to your essence. It's often referred to as the Akashic records, a universal field of consciousness harboring every thought, emotion, and intention across the spectrum of time. This transcends mere mythology or organized religion. It's a deep-seated knowing so intrinsic it existed before the very systems that attempted to erase it. The empowering truth is this: you don't require decades of isolation in a remote location to tap into this profound source. A mere few moments of concentrated intention, achieving the correct internal resonance, can ignite something within you. From the earliest dawn of your awareness, before you could even articulate a complete sentence, the world began molding your perception. You were born with innate intuition, a direct and unadulterated connection to something far grander than yourself, an inherent sense of truth that required no external explanation. But almost instantaneously, the programming began its subtle infiltration. You were meticulously taught how to think, what to accept as truth, and crucially, what to reject as improbable. Imagination was relegated to the realm of childhood, inner knowing was dismissed as mere superstition. Anything defying empirical proof, anything beyond the reach of touch, sight, or precise measurement was quietly discarded as either irrelevant or potentially dangerous. They didn't eradicate mystical insight in a dramatic burning. They discreetly buried it under layer upon layer of formal education, societal dogma, and the incessant distractions of modern life. You were confined to classrooms, relentlessly memorizing answers to questions you'd likely never encounter in the real world. You were rewarded for parroting back facts, yet subtly punished for daring to pose the wrong kinds of probing questions. Your natural instincts were systematically uprooted. Your inner voice was systematically drowned out by the relentless chiming of bells, the suffocating weight of deadlines, and the endless expectations imposed upon you. The education wasn't solely about mathematics and grammar. It was about training you to constantly seek external validation for the truths you intrinsically possessed. And the ultimate cost? You forgot how to truly listen, not merely with your ears, but with the entirety of your being. You were never informed that there's a constant current pulsating beneath the surface of reality itself, a low hum beneath the cacophony of the everyday, a profound field of consciousness accessible not through blind faith, but through resonant attunement. This field, the Akashic Records, isn't a fictional construct. It isn't a religious text or a mere spiritual metaphor. It's a fundamental structure of reality, whispered about by generations of mystics, hinted at by revolutionary quantum theorists, and intuitively felt by anyone who's ever experienced an inexplicable flash of knowing deep within their soul. But why has this knowledge remained largely concealed from the masses? Because an individual who is truly connected to their inner wisdom is inherently empowered, and an empowered individual isn't likely to blindly conform. They don't tenaciously cling to outdated systems that exploit their precious time, drain their vital energy, and stifle their very soul. They don't succumb to panic in the face of uncertainty because they've already glimpsed beyond the conventional veil of perceived reality. So instead of bestowing upon you direct access to that inherent power, the world bombarded you with substitutes, manufactured idols of truth. Self-proclaimed experts, manipulative algorithms, and carefully curated influencers, all meticulously designed to keep you perpetually out of sync with the singular frequency that cannot be commodified or branded, your own intrinsic resonance. Certain knowledge possesses the potent capacity to undermine the established order. Such knowledge is deliberately withheld. Unlock your potential. Claim your destiny. Discover transformative insights and ancient wisdom in our exclusive complimentary newsletter. Sign up using the link below and secure your free copy of the Kybalion before it's gone. Once you begin to comprehend the true nature of the Akashic Records, you realize you've never been truly alone. You've been subtly guided, gently nudged, divinely protected, and occasionally even explicitly warned, but you simply fail to recognize the subtle signals because you were never given the foundational tools to effectively listen. That inexplicable intuition you've routinely dismissed as coincidence, that undeniable feeling that something was amiss or about to unfold that wasn't paranoia or random chance. That was direct contact, albeit fleeting, subtle, yet undeniably powerful. The Akashic field isn't a distant realm you travel to through elaborate rituals. It's a ubiquitous field you consciously tune into. It represents the fundamental frequency underlying your everyday distractions, lying just beneath the surface of your societal conditioning. Each time you quiet the incessant chatter of your mind, even for a fleeting moment, you inch closer to hearing it, the soft whispers of the authentic self you were before the world's noise began to shape you, the original blueprint of your soul's profound purpose, the complete and unedited memory of everything that has ever been, and every possibility that remains within your reach. They meticulously taught you to suppress the knowledge you already inherently possessed, because the moment you truly remember, their carefully constructed control begins to irrevocably dissolve. And that is precisely what they fear above all else, not outright rebellion or open displays of anger, but the act of profound remembrance. Because a soul that reconnects with its source becomes impervious to manipulation, resistant to division, and immune to the allure of cheap imitations of truth. It listens with a renewed clarity, lives with an undeniable authenticity, and becomes undeniably uncontrollable. Most individuals traverse life under the ingrained assumption that reality is comprised solely of tangible objects. Solid walls, paved roads, physical hands, and glowing screens. They falsely believe that the world abruptly ends at the arbitrary boundaries of what their senses can perceive or their scientific methods can definitively prove. But what if reality isn't fundamentally solid or static? What if it's ultimately coded, not in the simplistic manner of a mere video game, but as a vibrant, living, breathing, and infinitely intelligent entity, dynamically nonlinear and inherently responsive to your very being? What if everything you've ever done, every thought you've ever entertained, every emotion you've ever felt has indelibly imprinted a unique signature upon the underlying fabric of existence, stored not in transient memory or perishable matter, but in the form of enduring frequency? That, in essence, is the true nature of the Akashic records, a vast field of encoded awareness existing beyond the limiting constraints of conventional space and linear time, where every conceivable possibility, every potential timeline, and every pivotal choice exists in a state of subtle, perpetual vibration. Some have eloquently termed it the collective unconscious, others have reverently called it the Book of Life. But it ultimately transcends any simplistic label, because it's not merely a metaphor or a mythological construct. It's a fundamental structure intrinsically woven into the very matrix of consciousness itself. You've already brushed against it, perhaps unknowingly. That inexplicable sensation of déjà vu you couldn't logically explain away, that remarkably vivid vision in a dream that later materialized into tangible reality. That unwavering certainty that a specific person or defining experience was destined to cross your path. You were not merely imagining things. You were momentarily attuned to the inherent signal where time subtly folds in upon itself, and crystalline clarity momentarily replaces the pervasive fog of confusion. That profound signal is the Akashic field itself. You don't actively reach it by frantically chasing after it. You passively encounter it by intentionally slowing down, consciously tuning in, and actively matching its intrinsic resonance. Across millennia, mystics and sages have consistently accessed this empowering field. The profound insights they have ascribed to divine inspiration or deep soul memory modern science is tentatively beginning to describe in radically different terms: holographic theory, zero-point energy, and the baffling phenomenon of quantum entanglement. These aren't simply buzzwords casually thrown around by so-called spiritual influencers. They represent the cutting edge of physics, boldly grappling with the timeless truths that spiritual traditions have intuitively known all along. That consciousness doesn't mysteriously arise solely from the confines of the brain. It extends far beyond its perceived limitations, and within that vast and intricate web of energetic information, absolutely everything is meticulously stored. Your past lives, your unresolved fears, your long-forgotten dreams, and the ultimate trajectory of your soul's profound journey. Envision it as an infinitely complex internet, not one you navigate using your hands or a screen, but one you consciously explore with the full breadth of your expanded awareness. Every soul possesses its own unique data stream. Every action generates its own distinct ripple. And unlike our flawed and often corrupted human databases, this field is inherently unbiased, incapable of being corrupted, and incapable of being owned. It represents pure, unadulterated consciousness, unfiltered, raw, and exquisitely precise. And when you truly access it, you don't merely passively see things from a detached perspective. You vividly feel them with the full force of your being. You vividly remember who you authentically were before you were told who to be by external forces. You powerfully recall the profound contracts your soul deliberately made, the vital lessons you incarnated here to embody, and the infinite array of potential futures you consciously possess the power to either collapse or actively create. It's not locked away behind arbitrary spiritual gatekeeping. You don't need to expend your hard-earned money to pay someone else to interpret your records. You were born with the intrinsic key. Your conscious intention is the tuning fork. Your receptive stillness is the gateway, and the profound power of silence is the password. The Akashic records aren't located somewhere far away. They aren't exclusively accessible in the sky, within the hallowed halls of a temple, or upon the summit of a remote mountain. They're right here, pulsing through the very fabric of reality, patiently awaiting for you to intentionally lower the volume of the external world long enough to hear the underlying code beneath the relentless noise. They're not something separate from you. They're made of the very same fundamental essence as you, and that's the crucial secret most people sadly never realize. You don't passively access the Akashic records as if you're merely accessing a file on a computer. You vividly remember them because they were always intrinsically part of you. Every empowering answer you've been frantically chasing already exists deep within you, patiently awaiting your conscious acknowledgement. The fundamental question is this: are you finally ready to actively listen? A subtle lie subtly permeates spiritual circles like pervasive secondhand smoke, gently whispered but deeply absorbed. That true awakening is a lengthy, arduous process, that you require decades of dedicated stillness, devoted silence, or some contrived mystical bloodline to unlock higher levels of awareness, that only a select few individuals, monks, psychics, or enlightened gurus possess the requisite capacity to tap into the profound realm that lies beyond the veil of perceived reality. But that isn't the actual truth. That's merely another carefully constructed layer of societal programming subtly wrapped in seemingly sacred robes, meticulously designed to keep you subserviently obedient in a different costume. The Akashic records don't demand your suffering or sacrifice. They don't require your unwavering loyalty to specific dogmas. They aren't concerned with your resume, your elaborate rituals, or your ostentatious displays of righteousness. They only respond to one fundamental thing: resonant attunement. And resonant attunement doesn't require years of dedicated practice. It only requires authentic presence, a subtle shift in perspective, a conscious choice to change direction, a singular moment where you intentionally cease tuning into the pervasive chaos and instead begin tuning into the underlying universal current. This is precisely why sound possesses the transformative power to alter absolutely everything. Frequencies aren't merely abstract concepts. They constitute the very architecture of your lived experience. The right specific vibration bypasses the limitations of logical thought, transcends accumulated trauma, and neutralizes the ego's inherent resistance. It effortlessly drops you into the tranquil space between thoughts, where profound truth has always been patiently awaiting you. This is precisely why certain tones, ancient chants, or precisely calibrated binaural beats aren't merely relaxing. They are actively recalibrating your energetic system. They aren't based on magical spells or wishful thinking. They're based on precise mathematical principles. They intentionally attune your individual awareness to actively match the underlying field where the Akashic records reside. When your overworked nervous system gradually begins to relax, when your breathing gently slows, and when your restless mind finally ceases its relentless attempt to label and categorize everything it encounters, you aren't consciously going anywhere. You simply and effortlessly open. And within that profound opening, vivid images effortlessly appear. Powerful words softly drop in, and long-suppressed emotions are easily released. You witness compelling memories that don't necessarily originate from your own personal life, or perhaps they do. You receive illuminating glimpses of the true path your soul is intended to take with a crystalline clarity so remarkably sudden it makes you question why you ever felt perpetually lost and confused in the first place. This isn't mere imagination. It's expanded perception that has broken free from the limiting constraints you've unintentionally inherited. The Akashic records aren't a separate realm that you have to arduously earn the right to visit. They are more like a radio station that is constantly broadcasting its signal. But your internal radio has been chronically jammed by the unrelenting noise of the world, your own inherent fears, and the omnipresent distractions of modern life. The empowering truth is that most people don't desperately need to exert more effort in their spiritual practice. They primarily need to minimize resistance to their own inner wisdom. This transformative shift can spontaneously occur during just 10 minutes of focused listening. During an ordinary walk in nature, during an emotionally moving song, or even within the depths of profound silence. And when it does occur, it doesn't feel overwhelmingly loud or particularly dramatic. It feels undeniably obvious and strikingly familiar, as if you've profoundly heard it before and have somehow just forgotten. That's the crucial difference between actively accessing truth and passively consuming information. One profoundly lands within you, the other quickly passes through you. You've likely encountered these profound moments before, those fleeting flashes of sudden clarity that didn't originate from strenuously thinking harder but from intentionally feeling deeper. That's a vivid glimpse of the records, a subtle crack in the carefully constructed facade, a potent sign that you're already significantly closer than you presently imagine. And the more you intentionally cease frantically chasing external answers, and instead start actively listening to your inner wisdom, the more frequently these profound moments will spontaneously appear. The crucial shift isn't external. You don't mysteriously become enlightened by embarking on exotic travels or diligently learning someone else's perceived truth. You intentionally shift by actively returning to what you already are beneath the accumulated layers of societal conditioning. The Akashic records don't arbitrarily bestow upon you unprecedented power. They compassionately remind you that you never truly lost it in the first place. And when you intentionally align with them, life doesn't suddenly become easy or problem-free. It simply becomes profoundly real. That is precisely what the ego inherently fears. Clarity, because once you hear the authentic answer, you can never again feign ignorance. You can no longer regress to blindly faking your way through someone else's arbitrarily assigned path. This is precisely why people spontaneously break down in tears the very first time they authentically access the profound field of the records, not because they encounter something alien or frightening, but because they vividly remember something profoundly sacred they had somehow forgotten. A deep and intrinsic part of them softly whispers, "Oh, it's me. It's always been me." And from that pivotal moment forward, life can never be quite the same, not necessarily because it has dramatically changed, but primarily because you yourself have fundamentally transformed. Everything you've been meticulously taught has subtly encouraged you to primarily rely on your external senses, to only confidently believe in what you can empirically see, audibly hear, and physically touch. That reality is rigidly limited to what's measurably quantifiable, demonstrably provable, and meticulously peer-reviewed. You were explicitly rewarded for adhering to strict logic, implicitly praised for meticulous analysis, and consistently conditioned to view the unseen as an intrinsic threat to your intelligence. Intuition subtly became a derogatory term. Authentic feeling was unfairly equated with weakness, and profound knowing was condescendingly dismissed as mere guessing. But the deepest truth, the most fundamentally important aspects of who you are and why you're presently here, exists far beyond the limited reach of cold, rational logic. Logic isn't inherently bad. It's a useful tool that effectively assists you in constructing houses, solving intricate puzzles, and safely navigating busy traffic. But it certainly isn't the primary language of the soul. It's not the authentic language of profound memory, underlying energy, or expanded vision. The Akashic records don't communicate in tidy bullet points or meticulously organized spreadsheets. They aren't concerned with being demonstrably provable in a sterile laboratory setting. They primarily communicate in the richly symbolic language of metaphor, the vividly evocative language of imagery, the powerfully persuasive language of emotion, and the immediate and unadulterated language of instant transmission. They effortlessly arrive in precisely the way your innermost self already intuitively knows how to authentically receive, but your consciously constructed outer self has sadly forgotten how to readily recognize. We've been systemically programmed to subtly shut down this profound channel of communication, to treat our precious dreams as mere random noise, to nonchalantly dismiss meaningful synchronicities as mere coincidence, and to confidently ignore our innate gut instincts as demonstrably irrational. But actively pause and think about it for a moment. How frequently have you experienced a pervasive feeling about something that later demonstrably turned out to be perfectly correct? How often have you spontaneously met someone new and instantly known there existed a significantly deeper connection between you both? How many times have you felt profound truth spontaneously rise up within your body, even when your conscious mind possessed no objective proof? That's not merely random chance or delusion, that's authentic contact. Actively accessing the Akashic records doesn't necessarily mean hearing a booming voice or witnessing a dazzling display of flashing lights. Most of the time, it's profoundly quiet and intensely subtle, a sudden and unbidden emotion, a vivid mental image that doesn't quite feel as if it's exclusively your own, a complete sentence that effortlessly forms within your mind with an intrinsic certainty that leaves absolutely no room for lingering doubt. These seemingly insignificant experiences constitute the subtle whispers of the underlying field, the soft pulse of underlying consciousness compassionately reminding you that you are fundamentally more than just your arbitrary job title, your accumulated trauma, and your carefully constructed goals. This is precisely where authentic truth resides, in the potent places that cold logic was never properly designed to reach, in the tranquil space behind your incessant thoughts, and in the subtle sensations that spontaneously arrive long before the conscious language has even had the opportunity to rationalize them away. And this is precisely why so many people tragically miss it altogether. They're primarily occupied with strenuously trying to consciously figure it all out instead of simply and intuitively feeling their way through. But once you intentionally cease relentlessly asking, "Is this objectively real?" and instead intentionally begin asking, "Why does this intrinsically feel so true?" absolutely everything begins to radically transform. You actively cease chasing after external validation and instead intentionally begin following your own resonant frequency. And authentic resonance never inherently lies. It doesn't require any external proof to feel profoundly real. It simply powerfully strikes you like a long-forgotten chord being deliberately struck deep within your heart. This is why profound stillness is inherently dangerous to the established system, because in tranquil stillness, you begin to vividly hear empowering things they never intended for you to hear. You begin to discern crystal clear clarity. You effortlessly access profound memory, and you vividly hear your own authentic soul softly speaking to you through the pervasive static of the world. And when that profound shift occurs, the deceptive illusion finally begins to demonstrably crack. You vividly begin to see that the limiting constraints subtly placed around your individual perception weren't naturally occurring. They were deliberately trained and carefully designed. Every single time you dismissively disregarded a heartfelt feeling, purposefully shut down an intuitive knowing, or intentionally ignored a vivid dream, you were mindlessly doing exactly what they programmed you to automatically do. Actively denying your own innate connection to the underlying field and actively denying your own intrinsic access point. But here is the empowering truth they could never completely erase from you. Once you've authentically listened, truly listened, you can never completely unhear what was profoundly meant for you. And once you've authentically felt it, even for a fleeting second, no amount of insidious programming can ever completely silence it again. There is a profound reason why so many people perpetually feel as if they're silently carrying a weighty burden they can consciously name. It isn't merely the result of accumulated stress or unresolved trauma. It's the deep and pervasive ache of disconnection, a sense that something fundamentally vital is subtly missing, perpetually just out of tangible reach but somehow never completely explained. You can often feel it most acutely in the tranquil moments of solitude, during the lonely hours of late nights, And in the seemingly empty spaces in between the major events of your life, that palpable tension that subtly sits within your chest, softly whispering that there's undeniably more to your existence than what you've been routinely handed. And the empowering truth is that there undoubtedly is. You didn't arrive in this world as an empty vessel. You arrived consciously encoded with distinct patterns, with precious memories, and with vital lessons your soul deliberately chose long before you even opened your physical eyes in this specific timeline. But that profound wisdom was gradually buried beneath accumulated expectations, overwhelming responsibilities, and the relentless and often futile rush to desperately become what the world relentlessly demanded of you. You've been diligently moving forward while simultaneously dragging along invisible baggage that isn't even fundamentally yours to carry, cyclical patterns you didn't consciously create but somehow inherited, persistent pain that didn't originate with you but inexplicably resides deep within you. And here's what the Akashic records consistently reveal time and time again. Authentic healing isn't merely about fixing what has been broken. It's fundamentally about vividly remembering what has been intentionally forgotten. The honest answers to your most deeply pressing questions. Why do I persistently attract the same types of damaging people into my life? Why can't I ever feel truly and authentically fulfilled? Why do I persistently fear what hasn't demonstrably even happened yet? Aren't located anywhere outside of you. They're meticulously written within the Akashic field, your individual field, your soul's intrinsically energetic imprint diligently stored across multiple lifetimes, patiently waiting for you to finally cease frantically running long enough to consciously ask the authentic and empowering questions. When you consciously enter the profound space of the Akashic records, it doesn't qualitatively feel like objectively learning something new. It intrinsically feels like vividly recognizing something you've always known deep down. You don't necessarily receive dramatically new information. You consciously receive profoundly empowering truth that spontaneously feels eerily familiar. Like someone compassionately turning on a light in a room you didn't even realize you were unconsciously sleeping in. You vividly remember authentic versions of yourself who consistently endured, relentlessly overcame, and deeply knew unconditional love, heartbreaking loss, intrinsic strength, devastating betrayal, and undeniable power. Suddenly, your current challenges no longer feel arbitrarily random. They consciously feel chosen, profoundly meaningful, and intimately aligned with your deepest values. And this empowering shift has the potential to radically transform absolutely everything about your life. When you intentionally cease seeing your deeply ingrained wounds as arbitrary flaws and instead start seeing them as inherently valuable keys, your authentic healing can finally truly begin. Not because you discovered some clever new strategy or insightful technique, but simply because you authentically and actively listen to the deepest message skillfully encoded within your own life experiences. The Akashic records don't provide superficially shallow comfort. They don't superficially tell you only what you consciously want to hear. They intentionally provide you with a profoundly honest perspective so powerful it can effectively disarm your deepest defenses. They accurately reflect you back to yourself with such startling clarity that the limiting story you've been telling yourself, the self-defeating story in which you're consistently powerless, irreparably broken, and perpetually behind, can simply no longer withstand the powerful force of authentic truth. And this transformative process isn't always intuitively easy or entirely painless. Sometimes the records compassionately show you the precise moment you deliberately gave your personal power away to others. Sometimes they skillfully reveal the specific lifetime in which a specific cyclical pattern deliberately began. Sometimes they subtly call you out in the most gentle yet undeniably firm way. But they never intentionally do this to consciously hurt or deliberately punish you. They do it because your soul is genuinely ready to consciously shift, and it has been diligently waiting patiently and quietly until you consciously remembered how to authentically ask for compassionate guidance. There is no external permission required, no elaborate ritual absolutely necessary. You are intrinsically the inherent password. Your conscious willingness to authentically listen is the intrinsic key. And when you finally consciously enter the profound field of the Akashic records, not with a demanding sense of entitlement, but with sincere curiosity and an open heart, the empowering response is instantaneous. Not because the records themselves were somehow consciously unlocked, but primarily because your consciousness were finally consciously unlocked. Authentic healing intentionally begins with profound honesty. And there is nothing inherently more honest than what you naturally hear when you finally get sufficiently quiet enough to vividly remember who you authentically are. From the precise moment you first arrived in this world, your unrealized potential was intuitively obvious, not necessarily to you, of course, but intrinsically to the surrounding systems. They skillfully perceived your intrinsic sensitivity, your unshakable intuition, your unusually vivid dreams, and your strikingly quiet wisdom. And they inherently profoundly knew that you carried something they couldn't manipulate or control. So they deliberately did what all established systems of control do when they are consciously faced with genuinely authentic power. They skillfully buried it, not necessarily through overtly malicious force, but primarily through subtle yet persistent repetition. Not through overt violence, but primarily through relentless distraction. They skillfully taught you to confidently laugh at your own intrinsic inner voice, to systematically prioritize external approval over your authentic internal truth. They intentionally flooded your impressionable young life with a cacophony of incessant noise so you'd never consciously hear the subtle and unwavering guidance of your own innate and unique spirit. They diligently built a world where being pervasively disconnected is actively rewarded and consciously being genuinely intuitive is routinely ridiculed. And this insidious strategy demonstrably worked at least for a specific period of time. You subtly began doubting the very core aspects that once inherently made you feel fundamentally sovereign. You started insidiously trading in your invaluable instincts for the false promise of empty logic, your limitless creativity for the perceived safety of bland conformity, and your precious soul for the often hollow promise of mere productivity. And perhaps the most dangerously insidious aspect of it all, you didn't even consciously realize it was skillfully happening to you. You falsely thought it was simply the process of maturing or growing up. You erroneously thought you were fundamentally becoming more realistic. But what you were tragically and unknowingly becoming was significantly more predictable. And predictably compliant people don't consciously challenge the established system. They unconsciously feed it. But the timeless Akashic records aren't demonstrably concerned with what the external world has painstakingly taught you. They perfectly remember who you intrinsically were long before the external world even got effectively involved. They accurately reflect back the fundamental truth of your original design, inherently powerful, inherently multidimensional, and inherently untethered to conventional societal limitations. They emphatically remind you that you didn't consciously come here to intentionally play small. You didn't consciously incarnate here to obediently follow arbitrary rules specifically written by people who directly profit from your perceived sense of limitation. You deliberately came here encoded with inherent codes, with inherent vision, and with an inherent resonant frequency capable of disrupting anything maliciously built on the shaky foundations of widespread fear and pervasive control. And that is precisely why you were intentionally targeted, not necessarily as an individual in a uniquely personal way, but specifically systemically, because when significant numbers of people genuinely remember who they fundamentally are, they often become fundamentally ungovernable. Not necessarily in a recklessly irresponsible way, but significantly in a profoundly sovereign way. They intentionally cease actively seeking permission to simply exist as they are. They intentionally cease habitually trading in their most profoundly authentic truth for the empty promise of superficial comfort. They intentionally cease mindlessly asking others to somehow validate what their own soul intrinsically knows to be profoundly true. This is fundamentally what the profound records demonstrably do. They don't deceptively inflate your inherently fragile ego. They subtly dissolve it, and in its rightful place, they compassionately reveal the empowering blueprint you've tragically forgotten, the one that profoundly shows you why you're so uniquely drawn to specific types of people, why you have consciously faced specific types of hardships, and why your profoundly meaningful life has intentionally unfolded in the precise way it presently has. And suddenly, you're no longer a helpless victim of your life's complex story. You're the empowered individual skillfully holding the authentic pen. The established system actively fears precisely this empowering moment, the profoundly meaningful moment when a precious soul consciously reclaims its inherent authorship, because it inherently knows that once you access this empowering level of crystal clear clarity, you demonstrably won't willingly revert to who you previously were. You won't continue to falsely pretend to be blind again. You demonstrably won't continuously play a subservient role that was never authentically written specifically for you. And even more profoundly, you'll spontaneously start inspiring countless others to consciously do the very same thing. Your authentic power was never demonstrably in question. Only your genuine awareness of it was temporarily dormant. And now that authentic awareness is slowly and steadily waking up, not necessarily through brute force, but demonstrably through profound remembrance. Not through destructive rebellion, but demonstrably through intrinsic resonance. Because you fundamentally can't effectively fight against what you've demonstrably outgrown. You intentionally rise gracefully above it, and the empowering version of you that is authentically aligned with your profound records doesn't desperately fight for external validation. It simply and authentically speaks, and the deceptive illusion demonstrably falls away. You've been skillfully taught to consciously seek profoundly insightful answers solely outside of yourself, from books, gurus, pre-established systems, and meticulously strategized techniques. Always something or someone external. Always someone else's pre-packaged method. But with respect to the profound Akashic records, the intrinsic key isn't demonstrably outside of you. It demonstrably never truly was. The powerful records aren't maliciously locked behind an arbitrary gate. They're vibrantly vibrating all around you, and more importantly, vividly vibrating profoundly within you. The authentic challenge isn't necessarily gaining. So, in essence, you were never truly disconnected. The wisdom, the answers, the profound knowing you seek, it's all already within you, encoded in your soul's blueprint within the Akashic records. It's just a matter of tuning in, of quieting the noise and remembering how to listen to that inner voice, that inherent truth that resonates deep within. It's about reclaiming your power, your authenticity, and living a life aligned with your soul's purpose. I hope this message has resonated with you and sparked something within. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your experiences, or any questions you might have about the Akashic records and tapping into your own inner wisdom. Please feel free to leave a comment below. Let's start a conversation. And if you enjoyed this and want to explore more on this topic, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. We're all in this journey of awakening and remembering together.